The gospel was unchanged, and as it happens, the collect, which was already renewed in 1969, did not need to be changed. It is perfect for this Feast of Divine Mercy. And I would just like to share a typical scene in which we see mercy in unexpected corners, an invitation for us to do the same. Never judge, but always be, as God is, on side. You could be the means of salvation of somebody who is losing hope. Remember that the Lord taught St. Faustina that the greater the misery of the soul, the greater its rights over His mercy. Here's a little glimpse of that divine love piercing through the clouds to reach us, no matter how fallen we may have been. And do the Stations of the Cross. Remember that, especially when it comes to the third fall, when he's horizontally inclined, humanly speaking, he had no power left. It's rather like our situation. What is serious is not so much falling as lying on the ground. It's an unusual story, this one, from China. Stephen lives in Hong Kong and works as a driver for the court there. Last December, he and a fellow worker were given the job of taking a man condemned to death to the place of execution. We here in Ireland are not used to that kind of situation, but in some countries it's very much a weekly event. I have somebody I know in a Muslim country right now, I think he's in Riyadh, and every Friday there's a public execution. Anyone can go. He went one time. Stephen and the prisoner were in the van. The condemned man was about 30 years old. Does that sound familiar? Stephen was here, and there was supposed to be another driver. There were always two to take these people to their unhappy end. But the other one, for some reason, didn't show up. Now, mercy is also providence. Read the signs of providence. Be as elastic as the wisdom of God. Don't refuse the grace of the unexpected. It gives you peace and also makes you open to what He might want to do in that situation. Stephen, this driver, felt deeply in his heart the need to love this man. Now, starting there, listen to these promptings: goodness and kindness. The Lord, the Holy Spirit, also uses the emotions, as nudges. So, this need to love this man, to be with him as a friend in this difficult moment of his life. For Stephen, to love his neighbour had become a way of life, so that he was able to put aside his worries about the possible risks he might run. His fellow driver's delay gave him a chance to begin a dialogue that would otherwise not have been possible. Stephen found out that the prisoner had 2 sons. He tried to comfort him and said a few simple, but for him deeply felt words about the meaning of life. So one starts off with what's common territory. The other man was touched by this and understood that Stephen was saying words from heaven. And in turn, he revealed to Stephen that he was a Christian. In fact, he'd been baptized when he was a child, and for a while he'd even worked as a driver for his parish. But certain things had happened in his church that had scandalized him, and he left the church, taking another direction, which turned out to be a negative one. But that's familiar, isn't it? How old Nick uses this lever. He told Stephen that he'd been sentenced to death for robbery and murder. He admitted his guilt for the robbery, but said he was innocent of the murder. In fact, he knew who had committed it. In prison, he'd been subjected to torture in order to make a confession. And having experienced every kind of suffering, in the end he decided not to cause another person to suffer what he himself had had to go through. Now, obviously there was some kind of merit there, wasn't there? He also told him of a dream. Now listen to this, it's kind of interesting because lots of us have dreams and don't know what to make of them. A dream he'd had 3 years before. He dreamt that before he died, someone near to him would speak about God. Both he and Stephen felt the presence of God at this moment, God who is love. Only a God who is love could make himself present in such an unexpected way as this, just a few moments before he would die. The man expressed his sorrow for a life he felt he hadn't lived well. Even though he hadn't committed murder, he'd done many other things that were wrong. Stephen then spoke of God's mercy, reminding him that God is like a mother who's always waiting for the child's return. He had a crucifix in his pocket and gave it to the prisoner to kiss. It was a very deep moment for both of them. Now, here's another dream. A few days earlier, the man had dreamt of his mother, who was already in heaven, surrounded by shining white swans. Now he understood the meaning of this dream. It was God's love that forgives and purifies everything. And embraced by this love, he was prepared to die. Now that disposition of will is the crunch. Stephen's fellow driver arrived an hour late. It was an hour of time, an unexpected gift prepared by God and by his very special love for each one of his children. And through Stephen, we got a glimpse of God the Father's love for that condemned man, my son, my beloved. And that, from the host, is what the Lord, in his courtesy, is asking of each of us. Look at each soul that his providence sends to you with that divine regard. This soul, too, is my son, my beloved. Now we'll bless the image of the Divine Mercy. We ask the Lord to use this instrument to shed his rays of warmth and healing upon all who regard it, and to reign on our hearts, our homes, and reign over our wills, that he may be king of our time here on earth, and use us to transmit his warmth and healing to all that his providence sends us. God bless and sanctify this image, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Stream of light, a theme of ancient grace, in this hour, for us who in this tender face